Greetings, ladies, gentlemen, and hobgoblins. What follows is a review for Dwarf King's Hold, Dead Rising by Mantic Games. These self-contained games, you buy the box, it's got everything in it that you could possibly need to actually play the game. You're never expected to have to buy anything else. Those sort of games are really quite brilliant. We grew up on a staple of them, didn't we? Cluedo, Monopoly, Trivial Pursuit, that sort of thing. This is a small skirmish-based game. There's not many models for the dwarves. There only comes with 7 in the box. There's quite a few more undead. We've got the dwarves, we've got the skeletons, we've got the skeleton revenants, the skeleton dogs, and the dwarf mastiff. You can actually see all of these models in the unboxing video I did, which you can see here. Bam! You'll be able to see all of the quality, the detail of them before being constructed and after. You can also see the tiles. So there are 6 scenarios in the book, and they are all very different from each other. All of the starting positions for the dwarves and the skeletons are allocated on the map, and you preset them up and then off you go. It's the finer points of playing the game itself where the variation comes into play. Now the scenarios theme usually from the dwarves trying to defend their hold against the undead invaders. It's usually something like, say, escape the area. But while this theme is kept very well in place, each scenario does feel very, very different from each other, and it's been very well done there by Jake Thornton. The miniatures themselves aren't the most amazing gaming miniatures I've ever seen. However, they are pretty good. The detailing on the undead is better than the dwarves in my particular opinion. You can check that out for yourself and see what you think. I will say that they aren't based on a very wide base, so sometimes when you're trying to play there's a bit of a model falling over and that sort of thing. It's not too much of a biggie, it's kind of a bit nitpicking really. What is a little bit more annoying but somewhat understandable is the tiles. The floor tiles have to be put together obviously in an exact way for the mission, again just like things like Space Hulk. These particular tiles, they don't interlock together in any way whatsoever. You just put one tile next to another, it's quite flat. It does have a bit of grippable stuff on the bottom, but it doesn't really grip a table well enough to stop it moving. If your hand happens to brushes it when you're taking a model away or something, you'll very often find a tile moved out of place and you got to maybe put 2 or 3 other bits together again, some of the smaller fiddly ones. Again, you can accept it and get on with it because the limitations created by having jigsaw style clip together. I own Space Hulk, and the pieces, yes, they clip together and they're very thick, very well made cardboard in that particular case. However, over the time of quite a lot of use, there's like a layering of film on the top of them and that's starting to peel off. That's why I'm not going to bitch about it too much here. And if you don't like it that much and you're going to keep playing Dwarf King's Hold a lot, then what you could do, perhaps, is to play on a felt surface and felt the bottom of all of the tile pieces if you were that way inclined. The Undead's concept is to swarm the dwarves with superior numbers of models and more that can spawn in. It's harder for them to win in a fight. They have to gang up on the dwarves and try and use positioning to trap the dwarves in or delay the dwarves. The dwarves' way, they are more heavily armoured and more combat centric, and they move a lot faster than the undead. It's the one game in which dwarves will move faster than the enemy. Ooh, how about that? Yes, dwarves can move 6 squares and undead can move 4. The frontal arc is the squares in front of you and diagonal, but also the adjacent ones to the sides. If you can put your back up against a wall, you can't even get flanked. And it's that sort of positional thinking, and there's a few little niches here and there that you could perhaps make use of, and you do all of your movement and fighting through resources that you pick randomly up to your resource allowance for whatever scenario. So one scenario might say, well, this side can have 2 resources and the other side can only use 4. But of course the dwarves, the way they play is they draw more resources more frequently each turn, but the amount of goes each resource card has on it are generally lower numbers, mostly 1s and a couple of them are 2s. When you play that card, well, let's just say you play a 1, so your dwarf can move and then fight, for example. If you picked up a 2 card and you played it from your resource pile into your discard pile, then you can do it with one dwarf and then do it with the other dwarf. And you can't have a dwarf do another action after he's done one action in that turn. The undead, yes, they don't get to draw to their maximum resource hand at the end of each turn like the dwarves can. They can only draw one. However, the numbers on their cards are generally higher, going right up to 4 in some cases, you see. So if they draw 4, then they can have 4 undead models do a move and fight if they end up adjacent to something. So that is an action, you see. It's a move and fight, if so desired. You can do less, but it's still one action. It might seem like the dwarfs still don't have things quite well off. Well, this is what gives them the edge back again to even things. And I think this is a pretty balanced, even game. The dwarves get something special called follow-on actions. If you draw one of those, your dwarf can either do a move or attack. Remember I said before you can move and attack with an action. A follow-on action is a move or attack. You can't do both, you can only choose to do one. However, the massive advantage to these follow-on actions is that you can stack them. So, for instance, a dwarf that's already done an action, you wouldn't be able to play another action token and have him do something else that turn. You see, he's stuck, he's done his thing. However, a follow-on action would allow you to surpass your one action limit and to move or fight. And if you had another follow-on, then you could play it on the same dwarf again if you so wished, or a different one, and have him do it again. So if it's one of those escape the board sort of things, your dwarf could technically home run it with follow-on action after follow-on action after follow-on action to get off the board if you happen to have drawn that many follow-on actions. However, the undead, it's all about their positioning and guarding, to be aware of what your strengths are and to try and guard against them. And that's the great thing, you see, between the difference between the beginners and the more veteran players. You learn certain nuances. So technically you can use these follow-on actions to just give a little nudge and a little push in favour anywhere on the board that you so desire, and that's handy. The only other thing I would say though is that they've balanced that as well, because as soon as you start using follow-on actions you then can't use action points, you see. You do get to feel yourself having to think. However, the game is small, it uses a small amount of models, the games don't go on overly long. So you've got the 6 scenarios in the book. Technically it's more like 12, and the reason is because you play the 6 scenarios as the dwarves, but then when you come to play them as the undead, the challenges and the play style from the rules and from need of yourself are vastly different from the other sides. Now, for those of you out there that like playing role-play centric games or playing things with characters, and there is no sort of advancement as you play, there is no role-play element, this is just a fully combat-based game. See, what attracted me to this was its size. I'd played so many big tabletop battling games before, and then I've played so many board games, but my favourite passion is of course miniatures and battle scenario things. So something that's even more scaled down on such a very small size, to let you just set it up anywhere. You don't even need a big table. It's that small. The first scenario you can play on the very smallest of surfaces, in fact. It's so small. I'm happy to report that the combat mechanics really do work. They're quick, very easy to pick up, and you just roll one handful of dice once, and you look at the dice, and that is the result of and that's the combat done. Okay, so it's not like other games where you roll to hit and then roll to wound and then they roll to save, and it does wear you down after a while, doesn't it? Doesn't it? This is a sort of relief game in that sense, if you just want to play a quick game for fun. Dwarves are better at fighting, so they roll 4 dice. Undead, say a skeleton in this example, not very good at fighting at all, so it rolls 2 dice. Basically it's the highest die from the dwarf versus the highest die of the skeleton, right? So if the dwarf has rolled a 6 and the skeleton player has rolled a 5, that's his highest die, so it's highest to highest, then the dwarf has put a hit in on the skeleton. It's beaten the skeleton's armour as well, the 6, because the skeleton's armour is 2, so the 6 beats the 2, so we know that already. It's armour penetrating, so it's a wound. However, undead ignore the first wound suffered. Dwarfs don't. Then we check the next highest die, so let's just say the dwarf in this case has rolled a 3, and the skeleton's next highest other die, is a 2. The 3 is higher than the 2, so it's caused another wound to the skeleton, and in this particular case it's higher than the skeleton's 2 armour again. That is a second wound on the skeleton. At this point the skeleton would be boned, which means he'd collapse into a pile of bones on the ground. If you stand on one of these boned tiles, the skeleton can't get back up. If it gets back up in your adjacent frontal arc, you're allowed a free strike against it. If it's temporarily down, it will attempt to reanimate itself at the cost of an action point from the necromancer player. If the dwarf happens to have another 3, then that skeleton won't be boned, he'll be destroyed. For dice not rolled, you always count that as a 1 versus dice that are rolled, you see. So in this case the dwarf's also got a 3, so against what would be a 1. Looking at it the other way around, as soon as a dwarf sustains a wound, he gets an injured counter. You put a little bleeding counter under the model, and it always reduces the dwarf by 1 die when he's fighting, you see. So I really do have to give kudos here to Jake for coming up with a really fast, quick, clean system where you see it all from one roll of a die. So there are a lot of tools there to make your game unique, even though the setting in the scenario is quite limited. You've also got the hidden counters. You can start as many dwarves as you like in certain scenarios, hidden. And then you've got the dummy counters, so you can really play the psychology game against your opponent. He doesn't know which of those is actually got the dwarfs under it. Is he following a false lead? They are bringing out lots of expansions to this. So the first one en route is the Green Menace, and that is the Wood Elves versus the Orcs. But the really cool thing about that is that the races are going to be able to intermix. You could just play them off against each other in new combinations. You could have the Wood Elves versus the Dwarves and that sort of thing. And it's going to come with its own tile pieces. So you could mess around and use the 6 scenarios from the new one coming out and use them for the Dwarves versus the Undead if you so wished, or use the ones with the Dwarf and the Undead and use it here. That argument about whether it could become old hat, they are dealing with that, aren't they? On the face of what exists now, yes. But knowing what's coming, lots of options to keep things fresh for you. Well done, Mantic. Let's break it down exactly what this game is. It's a small, miniatures-based combat board game. It's quick to play, it's easy, it's fast, the mechanics are quick, the scenarios are good. At first it might seem like one race is beating the other a little bit too much, because one scenario might slightly favour the other, you think, as you play. Then when you take that next level and you become a better player, you will actually start winning. And you'll start learning the most effective way to play that race, and then you can flip it on over and do it again as the other side. Its online price is around about $31.50. I bought it so that it would be a refreshing small game to just play for gaming's sake, not just to play for the hobby sake or play because we all happen to play that. You can just bring it along as a box, sit down and play it quite quickly with somebody else. I'm going to give this 3.7 out of 5, so it's better than average, is recommended for its price. I would say I would put it up into the 4 out of 5, probably when the expansions come and there's even more productivity between them and more you can do. Remember, this isn't going to be a life-changing game. It's not going to be the game that completely fills that gaming appetite, but if you want another nice quality little title on your shelf amongst other ones, then this would be a great accompaniment to your gaming assortment. This has been Robert James Fremantle, signing off.